We'll be taking a close look at best practices and strategies for integrating sustainability into workplace operations and culture. Let me start by sharing a little bit about us, Change At All. We are Change At All, and as you can guess from our name, we're a boutique consulting firm that specializes in change and transformation. We partner and work with clients in various industries from all over the world. And joining us today are two leaders in the area of sustainability and environmental responsibility, Bitasta Roy Mehta and Aloysius Prakash Fernandez, also known as APF. Let's find out a little bit more about them right now. Our expert speaker today is Bitasta, who is the founder of Scope3Nexus Consulting Private Limited, a sustainability consultancy that specializes in decarbonizing supply chains and developing sustainability strategies tailored for businesses. With a focus on guiding small and medium enterprises, also known as SMEs, on their journey toward resilience and sustainable growth, Bitasta helps organizations align with future-focused environmental, social, and governance standards, also known as ESG standards. She is an MIT-trained sustainability professional. Bitasta actually transitioned into this field after over 2 decades of leadership in human resources management, and her experience in fostering both business efficiency and people's well-being has made her a highly effective change management expert focused on sustainable development. Bitasta's mission is to help businesses to deliver on the triple bottom line: environment, profits, and people. Her professional work extends to life cycle assessment, LCA, and the circular economy, and she is deeply involved in shaping ESG guidelines. As a UN volunteer, Bitasta actively engages with young leaders in Myanmar, empowering the next generation of sustainability advocates. With a passion for problem solving and a collaborative mindset, she brings a unique energy to sustainability initiatives, and she promotes inclusivity and long-term impact for organizations across the globe, all very important and noble goals. So welcome, Bitasta. It's really good to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call. I look forward to the conversation.
We look forward to it as well. So now our next expert is Aloysius, who is a highly respected economist and social worker. Aloysius has worked in several sectors of the development world. He was the first chairman of NABFINS, a financial subsidiary corporation of NABARD, India. Starting in 1971 with the Bangladesh Refugee Program as Deputy Director of Caritas India in disaster situations. Aloysius also served as full-time consultant to Canadian International Development Agency for 4 years, and to the World Bank in Washington for a year. He then returned to Bangalore with a mission to raise 1 million poor people above the poverty line. And he was mainly responsible for launching and sustaining the self-help group movement since 1984, which has over 90 million members in the country. He is fondly called the father of the SHG movement, and he pioneered innovative strategies in watershed management in dry and arid areas, which were then adopted into national policy. And from 1982 to 2009, Aloysius served as executive director of MyRada, working with over 1.5 million rural poor in several states in India, and also supporting programs abroad on a long-term basis, including projects in soil regeneration and rooftop rainwater harvesting structures. Aloysius has authored 15 books, and he is also the recipient of the prestigious Padma Shri Award in the year 2000. And this is a picture of the award, the Padma Shri Award, that was awarded to Aloysius. Thank you, Aloysius, for sharing this. So now let's welcome Aloysius. Hello, Aloysius. It's really great to have you here with us today as well.
Same here. I'm a bit much older than all the other participants around here, so I might strike a few discordant notes at times. I hope you understand.
Not at
Thank you
all.
thank you very much for taking the risk to invite me, and I hope that I can really be of some help or at least trigger some thinking. I'd like to say this right in the beginning, if you don't mind,
Of
that
course.
since most of our participants will be in the formal corporate sector, I think Bitasta has all the answers for you. She's far more equipped than I am. I have worked in the World Bank and governments, but my hands-on experience really has been in civil society. That is my rudder. So I can tell you all about how I worked on sustainability in my rudder, which I will keep for another day, and how I've worked on. There are two things: my rudder sustainability and sustainability of strategies that we adopted. However, and this is my point, I will make some comments on ESG, DEI, and few other things, because I do have some overview on this whole sector. So, and that, of course, will have some relevance to the corporate sector. So I would like to focus on that more than the first part. If people are interested in the first part, I'm willing to answer questions. Thank you.
As we find ourselves in an era of increasing social consciousness, organizations are also increasingly aware of how important it is to integrate environmental, social, and governance, widely known as ESG, policies into core operations. How do organizations achieve that challenging balance of profitability, environmental responsibility, and broader sustainability goals? And today we explore this tricky but exciting topic. So let's first start by defining sustainability terms for most of us who aren't familiar with these definitions of what does it mean to be sustainable. Perhaps ladies first. Bitasta, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. And while we are hearing about sustainability and sustainable development recently more than before, it has been there forever. As in, there is a Latin American saying which inspired me to get into the field, is that the land is an inheritance from, the land is not an inheritance from our ancestors, but is a loan from our children. And if you were to, it's going to be a long answer, Adeline, if you don't mind. And if I were to break it down into the new era of anthropogenic, which is industrial activities, which started about 150 odd years in full steam, Brundtland in 1987 defined sustainable development or sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs for the future. So the two are quite interrelated, I felt. And now let's break it down to, so that is the sustainable development definition, so to speak, which is broadly accepted, right? And if I were to extend that to the principles of sustainable development, it comes down to the mindless extraction of non-renewable resources. The earth is finite. All of us must have heard that there is no planet B. And while that is true, but we need to be more conscious about the materials which are being used right from the process of extraction, transportation, manufacturing. So that is the first principle. The consumption and production, right? Production and consumption in that order. So if I were to come down to the second principle of sustainable development, it is to take care of the non-human species with who we share the planet with. So making sure that we conserve the biodiversity, making sure that our activities are in sync with nature. And the third is a big space, which is taking care of humans, taking care of the social well-being of humans. And Aloysius's work over a period of time, although he is very humble and kind of diminished, then said that he has very little, but that is a big thing. Because taking care of humans is a big, in all social aspects, is a huge part of sustainable development. And the fourth principle is, how do we use renewable energy to go on about our industrial development, right? And if I were to take these four principles together and try to ascertain what are the synergies, you would find that the UN SDGs, which came about, 17 Sustainable Development Goals that have come about, are pretty much along the same lines of these four principles. And then you understand sustainable development as a whole. So, it's a broad definition, and sorry, I could not make it any, any shorter. But I thought it would be a good time to lay out all aspects of sustainable development and see how we have evolved, how we have defined, and then break it down to how businesses are adopting some of these definitions and what we should be doing.
I think that's great, Bitasta, and please don't apologize at all. I appreciate you sharing the four principles of sustainability. And actually, it is a very broad topic, and no problem. We can start broad and then go finer into detail. Aloysius, we would like to hear your thoughts on how you define sustainability.
Oh, well, I think Bitasta said that. I wouldn't want to repeat it. But you see, when I started working in development in 1971, I knew nothing about sustainability and ESG or DEI or SDGs for that matter. And in a way, thank God I didn't, because I may not have got started. But how did I get into this whole sphere? Well, it was through an experience, not through knowledge. In our philosophy, I didn't get through it through the Shankara, the Jnanam, but I got through it through the Ramanuja's philosophy of experience, of devotion, bhakti. So that's how I got into this business. And when after this experience of 1971, which was totally shook me up, it was a disaster. I see refugees today, but they are living quite well compared to what we faced in 71. I spent the first day shoveling babies of about a few ounces, into graves. So it was bad. But I decided to raise 1 million people above the poverty line if I could. And that's how, and Mairado, we did this. And we, just to give you 2 points, we focused on rural poverty. And as you know, the south of India, we have undulating lands. And so we worked in a catchment area of about 1,000 hectares, 1,000 acres. And we had a very simple policy. We said, in this 1,000 acres, you had about 200 families, see, and plus common land and all that. We worked at a simple formula: make the water walk and bring the soil back to life. Now, I've written books on both of these, but simply put, it is, how do you reduce the speed of the water from the top, from the crest to the valley? And if you don't do that, and as we destroyed our vegetation and as we did all sorts of things, the speed has increased from, let us say, 1 month to 1 hour. So how do you reduce that? So there are certain physical structures to be involved. And the second thing was bring the soil back to life. You see, to me, the big problem in India is not water. We have enough. Our problem is management of water. Our big problem is soil. We have less than 1% of humus in our soil. So we have to raise it at least up to 3. So we started improving the soils, cover crops and all sorts. I wouldn't get into that. And so it was basic and an approach, an environmental approach, the E in the ESG. And the impact was measurable. So it began to spread. But one thing we realized was it was not sustainable because we forgot that there are people involved, you see. And if you want something to be sustainable, you have to not just intervene in technology, you have to organize these people into some kind of an institution to manage that 1,000 acres. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. Why? Because there are conflicts within this. There are bigger farmers, smaller farmers, different classes, different castes, and different powers. It's a power structure. So that's how we got into the social aspect of it. And then our mission statement of Mairana was very simple: building poor people's institutions. So we said each intervention needs an institution that is appropriate to that intervention. And for example, when I started looking at development, I was told, don't give a fish to a person, but teach people to fish. But when I started working on the field in a watershed, I realized even after you teach people to fish, they can't reach the river because there are a lot of power structures in the way. There's caste, there is traditional practices. Women are always the last. So they never reach the river at all. And when they reach the river, they find that the rights to fishing have already been taken up by somebody else. So the issue of power is very important. So how do you counteract it? And that's how the self-help group of the poor emerged. And they found alternate routes to the river. See, not the usual routes. And that's how they spread. So that's how we went into the whole social sector. And the self-help groups have sustainable. You have 90 million people today in self-help groups. But many people in the cities don't know about them. Most of my friends wondering what the hell I'm doing. In fact, when I got the Padma Shri in 2000, they said, what the hell did this fellow do? Because I never do it in Bangalore. I do it far away from Bangalore. So, and as far as governance is concerned, I think that is subsumed into legal things, which I'll come to later. But as far as we are concerned, once we had these institutions of the poor organized, they lobbied for change at the local level. The people who had never dreamt stood for elections and became members of what we call the Gram Sabha, which is the lowest form of organization. So that is how we entered into this whole issue of ESG. Finally, Mark, is this. Then in the 90s came this whole issue of carbon sequestration and this and that and the other. As an economist, I didn't know what the hell that was all about, but I read a lot and I discovered that organic carbon is something without which photosynthesis cannot take place, etc., etc. Then I discovered that that's exactly what we had been doing for 20 years, because bringing the soil back to life is exactly that. But we did it to improve productivity. You see, not to sequester carbon. We did it to increase productivity, to cope with the gaps in the rainfall, so that the crop doesn't suffer, the risks are decreased. So we discovered that today we have done about 200,000 hectares of catchment. So if the soils have improved there must have been a hell of a lot of organic carbon sequestrated, and we just don't know how to measure it, but it's there. And the proof that it's there is productivity has doubled, agricultural productivity. So I just thought that's how we go into it. And but the important point is we have succeeded because what we did was measurable. The impact of the environment was measurable, and the impact of the social system was measurable. People stood on their own feet. They didn't depend. I can tell you a lot of stories on this, but I won't. So that's sustainability. Now, I'll comment on sustainability, on this whole, I think, very rich sphere of knowledge that I sort of was introduced to Next. Thank you.
That's a really
If I may
enlightening view.
just add in,
Sure, please.
from what I heard, Aloysius, it was such a rich conversation and a rich share. The reason, the couple of things which stood out for me personally is, the work around stakeholder engagement. Even when World Bank is giving loans for projects for dams, for example, hydroelectric dams, that stakeholder engagement at the ground level and the power structure that he talked about, right, is a part of the structure of engaging and deployment of the loan to be approved, and there are reviews that would be done. So what has developed organically in Aloysius' work is something which is actually a framework in the World Bank. So kudos to you.
Yeah.
The second thing is, you talked about definitions, right? In terms of net zero, I'm sure all the members on this thing, they have heard about net zero.
Mhm.
Net zero is very simple. It is how much greenhouse gas are you emitting and how much are you capturing, right? So carbon sequestration, what Aloysius has just referred to, is a big part of net zero. Because otherwise you will basically, to maintain a physical balance between the gases emitted vis-a-vis the gases which are captured. So, and also that leads to, if you bring back the soil captures most of the carbon dioxide. So what Aloysius talked about, the fertility of the soil increase, that itself has synergies with food, availability of food production, then growth of job opportunities. So everything is interconnected. So when he was speaking, I just, I was so inspired.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, again.
No problem.
Now you're reminding me of, can I intervene? You might remember talking about dams. I wrote a book a long time ago. No dam is an island. I see there was a big, you might have heard of the big pushback against the Narmada Dam in
Yes.
India, because it's written quite a lot about it. And then the World Bank took another project of Almaty Dam, which was in my state. And this was in 1986, long time ago. And at that time, the World Bank said, unless you have a plan for resettling the project affected families to the state they were before and even more, we will not give a loan to the government. So the chief secretary of Karnataka asked me, what the hell is this? Can you do something? And I had to change the whole policy of the government, which was formally clear the forest, resettle these people in the forested area. There were no more forests left. So they said, what do we do? I wouldn't tell you what I did, but the first report on how to resettle project affected families was written by me in 1987 in the World Bank. It wasn't an excellent report, but it got the loan. And it became a base for remodel. So I fully agree with this. You have to get people involved on big scales. In the watershed, we work on a small scale, of course. Thank you.
Yes, and really appreciate the very powerful sharing of your personal journey as well, Aloysius, in defining sustainability and what it means to you. And I totally agree, Bitasta. Thank you for speaking out because you're inspired to do so. There's really an interconnectedness of it, and as we said before, it's okay that we go into the broad definition of things, because as we are finding out now, we then find the solutions in the real-time, real-world problems that pop up. We find the interconnectedness, and we also find the solutions to these real-world, real-time problems. And so now that we've defined sustainability in broader as well as more specific goals, I'd like to explore now from a business perspective. So from a business perspective, we always talk about balancing, financial goals with ESG goals. And I know that, Aloysius, you have an economist background. So what would you say are the challenges or opportunities that can arise from balancing ESG goals with financial goals like profitability?
Now you're really turning me on. Yeah, okay. You see, I said I had I knew nothing about ESG and carbon when I started. And today, in a way, my dear, I am a little confused because there's such a lot of theory. In fact, and added to ESG and DEI and all the rest of it, you also have the P coming in because people are now asking how much are you investing in people who can lobby for change in the industry. So it's become ESGP. And last month, my government came out with a paper saying that if India wants to have sustainable development, they must really rely on the cultural strength of this country. So they've added a C to it. So it's getting broader and broader. It's fine. That's how theory expands. But there are two problems. One is it's very difficult then to really work out a strategy. Secondly, the gap between theory and practice. There's a lot of practice going on. I'll ask Bitasta to tell you about it. She knows more about it. But the gap seems to be increasing. In other words, the speed of the development of theory is going much faster than the speed in which measures to control greenhouse gases in actual form is taking place. So, with the gap is growing bigger, then we end up in some kind of a religious bubble, you know. So that's the first thing we need to really look at carefully. So what I suggest is we need to really unbundle ESG because there seems to be progress in the E because it's measurable. There's a lot of discussion about S, the affirmative action and all. I'll not go into it. And G. G will probably be absorbed into the whole legal framework that you require. Because if any company invests in technology that reduces carbon, and if the company next door doesn't do it, then obviously they're going to lose, you see. So there has to be certain clear policies and legislation of this, which is emerging in the EU and America. So the issue to me, I think, chiefly when it started with the World Bank, or was it the World Bank, I remember, coming out with something where they said, and all, it started to me from a position of a win-win situation. That if you invest in technology to control greenhouse gases, you will also increase profitability. That was very strong in the 2000s and all. But gradually, people have moved away from that position. People are questioning that position, and it went into a trade-off situation. You have to trade off something. So just now, the result of all that is there is a bit of a pushback. I remember, was it somebody from BlackRock some time ago who said that our company is no longer going to accept ESG as guiding our work, and this is so. There's a lot of a pushback against this, against it just now. And partly because of the confusion, partly because of the increasing theoretical framework that we are getting, and partly because of the responses which as a result, which are not sufficiently moving fast enough. So we are moved from a win-win situation, and Bitasta can correct me, to a trade-off position. And a trade-off situation is a very dicey position for any company. You know that better than I do. For example, if I asked my friends yesterday, about 10 of them, all big investors, when you invest in a company, did you ask about sustainability, environment, equity? What the bloody hell are you talking about? We look at the metrics. See, we want to see how much money is going to come in. And today they're talking about momentum investment. That's a new one. I said, what momentum? They said, we go with the herd. But you see, so nobody looks at ESG. That's the fact of the case. I mean, about the 10 people odd I spoke to, and I'm sure it's much more. So we are faced with these problems that we have to tackle. how do we really make it simple enough? And how do we, some companies are doing it. For example, I was working with some companies in my radar who felt that since their product required water, they wanted to hold water in catchment so that their water footprint would be equalized. So they wanted my radar to build dams and collect water in our catchment, in our watershed, so that water would come and they would measure the water, and so they could then write off, say that we are protected. But Maharana went into watershed not to collect water in the dams, but to increase the productivity of people. And I started, I remember 1980, by saying, my objective is to see that no water reaches the end of the catchment area. It should remain on top where the poor people farm. So you see, there's a lot of pressure. So, but we worked with them, they understood us, and I kept finally telling them our approach is not to collect water and measure how much we have collected, but we'll improve the livelihoods of people, increase their purchasing power, they'll buy your soap. Which is a far better way to go about things. So, but at least there are companies that started externalizing this about 15 years ago. Either in, I gave one example, collect water. Another example is offsets, like carbon credits was becoming quite popular. But of course, carbon credits, as long as the cost of carbon credits is less than investing in technologies, it will work. But if not, then the problem arises. So there is a general awareness today, is what I see. But unfortunately, there's a pushback. And I'm not certain how we are going to handle that. So what we need for now is a strategy for action to cope with the pushback, which is realistic. That's what I'm asking for. I'm too old to come up with it.
No, not at all. I think that what you're saying is very true, and thank you for your honesty. And I think honesty is really important in answering the tough questions like this one, really.
Yeah.
Because first we need to be very aware of what we're dealing with. Bitasta, same question to you. So I know that Scope3Nexus is a sustainability focused consultancy. So I really like to hear your perspective. What are the challenges or opportunities that arise from balancing ESG goals with profitability, and perhaps you have some real life case studies to share with us as well. That'd be great.
Well, what Aloysius said, I would not disagree completely, but I'll just add another flavor to what I see is most of the organizations are in this polycrisis, so to speak, with crisis on climate, but the physical risk, we have all felt the physical risk of temperature rise, right? So it has become, we have reached a point after this work has been going on for 30 years, Adeline. So it's not something which is new, but we are realizing it more because it has come closer to us, right? So the threat of climate change threat has come closer to us. So we are kind of shifting from to a place where it's almost like preaching to the choir, and there are very few people who think it's a climate hoax, right? So that's a good space to be. And it's an ongoing space, it's an evolution, and there is no doubt about that. And the evolution is such, like, for example, AI was introduced like in 2022, and at the pace that it has caught up, and the investments that we have seen in this space is because people realize immediate change in their profitability, or so to speak, the promise of profitability, right? They have not realized the profits as yet. But yeah, it's a balancing act, that is true. But why businesses are doing it, there are multifold reasons why businesses are open and openly committing to a net zero, right? And there are also investments, organizations who are banking on it to give them more profitability. And the one thing is the new population of customers, especially the young generation, is more. I'll give some pro cases as well as the con cases. Yeah, not the con ones, the cons one, the consequence cases.
Sure.
So One is there is a demand for it. There is a demand for your products to be more sustainable. So there is a marketability to it, right? But on the other side is also the world population has increased at a staggering rate and is increasing at a staggering rate, what we have not seen in the past century or centuries past, right, from the records. And the demand is growing for material. And what that means is the material use and the extraction of materials to make your cell phones, to make AI work, or to other things have already on the rise. For businesses, it makes sense to get back to the blackboard and think about material efficiency, right? Material efficiency is the first thing that you do when you talk about a sustainability strategy, because that gives you immediate savings, right? So this is not something new which is there. There's Lean, there is Green Six Sigma, that there are tools which have looked into production efficiency, and now Gemba, Kaizen, name it, and now it is a need more than ever to do it. Now, when you talk about the extraction of minerals, right, the rare earth minerals which go into our cell phones, they are not mined only for the minerals. There's a byproduct of a bigger, say, a copper mine, and there would be a byproduct of that particular mineral, right? So the rarity of that mineral. So organizations are looking at how do we innovate more? How do we reclaim the materials which are being used? So you must have heard about circular economy and recycling and so on. So circular economy is how do we extend the life of the product? And those new business models are coming up. People are getting innovative in terms of they do want to make money. Who doesn't want to make money, right? Everybody wants, but in a way that does not balance, that does not, that is a more centered approach rather than just doing it mindlessly. So that is another pull. The third pull is, when you look at the supply chain, because of the geopolitical risks that we have, because of the geopolitical situations that we have, if you look at the supply chain being completely global, right? And once there is climate risks attached to it, your risk to operating a business, it directly hits the risk of getting your supplies for your production. So businesses are getting more, in order to be resilient to risks, like even for COVID, we had faced it. So it was a stark reminder what it could be. But there are climate risks as well, right? So there's another reason why they're looking into it, all to make profits. But they also realize that what Aloysius referred to, that the gains will not be something which is immediate. But so isn't the case with a deployment of AI, for example. Any investment that you do, it would have a period of preparation. It would have a period of incubation period as well as your returns period, right? But to be honest, it is something that businesses are still, when I talk to businesses, they acknowledge it. So, you are not really talking to somebody which is calling a climate hoax. But I'll give you some examples, what you asked for, right? P&G, for example, because in the US, the use of water and the energy for their washing machines, the load for a household is the maximum. So what they have innovated a product which can operate at 40 degrees centigrade in the washing machine. So that means that and would give you the same quality cleaning. So that is the way companies are innovating to make products which will use less of minerals. I'll give you another example of, I'll not name the beer company, but I'll give you enough hints. It's a German beer company. That's not much of a hint to go with. But so they are talking about water management. So because the beer industry uses a lot of water, right? So does any other alcohol industry. But the dichotomy is their growth region is in LATAM, which is a completely, and in places where there is water crisis. All right. So they are talking about recycling the water and using it for their washing facilities and other equipment facilities or in-facility things. But at the same time, you are also going for growth and utilizing more water. So it really, it is something which is it's a balancing act, but these are the real examples. The other thing which Tata Company has been doing in India for the longest time is they do have a waste management in industrial processes. The waste management is a big saving and a big, it's an area where it's not only hazardous, but also it's a place where you can recover a lot of materials and go into. So they're talking about a lot of recovery of it in their process to go into their manufacturing process to reuse the materials. The worst industry, I would say, from okay, not worst, but maybe one industry which needs to rethink about their sustainability, especially when they brand their clothing, the apparel industry, right? Because most of our things go into landfills and we keep on buying. So we have, as consumers, have a responsibility, Adeline. And of course, the suppliers have an end of product responsibility in sustainability. In the world of sustainability, it's called EPR, where you talk about recovery of the unit that you have sold. It could be apparel, it could be an air conditioner, it could be anything, so that it doesn't reach the landfill. But you also talk about how do you recover and how do you reuse the materials, right? So the businesses are thinking actively on engaging their minds to not only using technology is a big part of it, but also using innovative materials, alternate materials. But the challenge that they're facing is, while there is an appreciation of the product, no, the businesses are unwilling, their customers are unwilling to pay the premium on that product. Because in the short term, like now, in some areas, solar energy has become almost negative in terms of cost to a consumer because of the production, right? But it all depends on, narrowing down of what I'm trying to say is it all depends. There is no one big strategy that you can apply to everybody because everybody has a success story. The idea
Definitely.
idea of deploying a sustainable development strategy is to understand the system, the ecosystem that it works under, within, and contextualize into your business and break it down. Unfortunately, what we are seeing is companies are saying net zero, but they don't have a carbon capture technology to have net zero. So the thing is, you contextualize it if you're a multinational organization, you look at the broad thing, but you engage the value chain, you engage in your scope 1, scope 2 emissions. Scope 1 is what you're emitting, scope 2 is what you're consuming, and the scope 3 is the entire, gamut of things. But unless we engage it's a ground up, but top down, it's a kind of a partnership which needs to happen. But the first thing is lay the groundwork of knowledge, lay the groundwork of know-how. Partnerships are important. Set your North Star. And then, but most important thing is contextualize into your business before you start communicating and chasing the regulations.
That's
So
really
that
good
would be my
advice.
2 cents worth.
Yes, no, that's really, really good advice, Bitasta. Thank you for sharing, especially the real life cases. I think many of our audience participants' ears pricked up when you mentioned the beer company, for instance. But totally, we talked about the pushback. Aman just mentioned pushback, and then now we also have the pool. And now, Bitasta, you've mentioned the pool. I don't know who wouldn't get behind something like efficiency. Everybody would get behind efficiency, whether it's in material efficiency or process or productivity efficiency. So talking about that, I know I promised everyone a little bit more time for Q&A. Actually, we are running a little bit short on time right now. So this is such a fascinating topic, and I foresee that we probably will need another conversation on change about the topic of sustainability in the near future. But I think that a lot of audience participants actually have questions that they are really eager to ask. So we will take some time now to answer some questions. But first, we do actually have some exciting news to share as Change at All. So we will actually be holding an in-person workshop this November where we'll have 3 full days of interactive sessions and skills building activities. So please Everyone on the call, please do join us for this experience in learning best practices for managing and sustaining change, as well as resistance to change, and at the same time, develop your skills in engaging stakeholders. This Change Activists 3-day workshop will culminate in certification at the end. Pre-order is now available, and so please do check out the page via the QR code that you see now on the screen, and it is also being shared in the chat box. So now let's take some time to have some questions and comments from the audience. The floor is now open. Please do raise your hand using the emoji feature, and we'll call on you. But if you prefer, you may also type your questions in the chat box. Anyone has any question for Aloysius and Bitasta now that we have them here with us? Doesn't have to be a question, can be a comment as well, a chance for exploring and the discourse. Aloysius, you are muted. So I might actually take the chance to ask one more question, actually. So if you allow me to ask one more question, and maybe our audience participants can take some time to think about what they want to ask as well. I actually would like to ask both our guest experts, what's your own long-term vision for sustainability and corporate responsibility is. For instance, I know that's a really big question, but let's say you can distill some advice for embedding sustainability into an organizational culture. If you could distill this advice into 3 steps, into a 3-step guide, what would it be? Bitasta.
I'll take you back to why in my organization, after learning all the aspects of sustainable development, why I chose Scope 3. Scope 3 is essentially all your indirect emissions, right? Which are happening from your value chain, which are also happening in the way you use travel by air, the transportation to your goods, and so on and so forth. So not direct production, not direct consumption, but the fact that you exist and the air that you breathe, that is Scope 3. It is vast, but I believe that not only big organizations can move the chain unless they get the entire value chain into the remit of reducing carbon footprint. Because in the world, there's 88% of the companies are small companies, small and medium companies. If you look at Singapore, 99%. If you look at Southeast of Asia, it is 97%. While they're small, they do not, and they have their own financial constraints, right? I believe in financial inclusion, and also I believe in educational inclusion. One of the things that I realized that very few of us have got the privilege to understand sustainable development and the course materials the way at least I have experienced at the Institute, right? But I do want to take it to the people who have not had access to it, but have the ability to do what I envision as well. So empowerment is a big thing in why I'm concentrating on value chain Scope 3 for big organizations, and also help the small companies, in order to understand how can they contextualize and provide and make their share of commitment and also become future resilient, right? Because so all things put together, I think my vision is at least I would be really happy if I'm able to if we get the entire value chain of small and medium organizations. So tomorrow, if we are doing business, we are not only thinking about profits, of course, business equals profit, but we are also thinking about basing and laying the foundations on intergenerational ethics. What is my work going to have an effect today? What is my work going to, so make a conscious decision make a business decision based on how are you going to operate today, with the view that in future, however I'm operating is only going to add to the growth and not depletion of resources. So yeah, I know that, and also one of the reasons, Adeline, I took this up because I know that in this lifetime of mine, maybe I'll keep on learning till I kick the bucket, and that's a good place to be. So it's a huge learning experience, but I'm happy that I've chosen the place.
Thanks for
And
that,
three things that you talked about, the three things, right? You wanted three things?
Oh, I actually gleaned 3 points from your what you were saying, but yes, please.
I think from my experience with organizations, one is commit. And when you say commit, it is governance. Data shows that when there is a good governance, even in small and medium enterprises, when there is a good governance and commitment, they have built a strategy, hence they are able to take actions, hence they're able to do the reporting. Unfortunately, we start from the reporting and try to make our way backwards, which will not work, because otherwise it's like maintaining a ledger account without doing business. So first is commit. The second thing is collaborate, because you yourself in this space will not be ever an expert in everything. And so the idea of getting and collaborating with the ecosystem around you, understanding the systemic dependence on each other is very important. And the third thing is communicate. In any change, communication within the organizations and outside with your stakeholders, with your investors is important. And also to not only deliver your message, but also to show business integrity, operational integrity. So yes, so commit, collaborate, and communicate would be my three.
That sounds great, and I love the alliteration, how you made it into 3 C's. And actually, I think Bitasta, your answer very nicely tied into one of the questions in the chat box about suggestions for small and medium companies who may want to contribute to the cause of sustainability and how they can go about it. I think your answer actually helped to answer this question as well. So now we have another question from Masayo Hada. What are some industry best practices for visualizing social commitment, performance, and roadmaps? One approach that Masayo Hada can think of is tagging specific targets of the UN SDGs under 17 goals, but it can be challenging to quantify improvements. Any thoughts and comments on that? I think this will be our last question, unfortunately, because we have just over 5 minutes to go now. Does Aloysius or Bitasta want to answer that question?
I think it's social, so I will give it to the expert here.
Yes, please. Aloysius, you are muted right now. Perhaps you would like to take the answer on. Aloysius, you are muted. Your mic is muted. Yes.
Unmuted now?
Yes, all good.
Yeah, I'd just like to reflect a little on what Bitasta said. But to me, I've worked in many institutions. I would focus on building good institutions. And unfortunately, all my young friends who have startups, their primary aim is to get money and get out as fast, sell their company and get out as fast as possible. They have no clue about how to build an institution. And that's not something easy. But does anybody run courses on how to build institutions? No. How do you build an institution? And that's one of the biggest problems. Now, I can't go into the theory of all that, but I have run programs. I still remember that it means you have to invest in capacity building. I remember in '86, I got some money, and my staff said, "Sir, there's property next door. Let's buy it and put up a training center." I said, "I'd like to spend it on capacity building." We called it, and as a result of that, we built up a strong tradition in the organization, which has carried it till today. So it's a bit, how do you build institutions? And that, I'm afraid, most people are not concerned about. They're concerned. If you're concerned about sustainability, you must be concerned about how to build an institution. And nobody's training anybody on this. Secondly, this means thinking slightly in the medium to long term, not in the short term. And our entire culture today, our financial reports, results are all in the very short term. So how do you think in the long term? That's commitment. And thirdly, I would say there has to be something in lifestyle and life practices. Today, there's a big movement for vegan and vegetarianism and all the rest of it. But, the head of a CEO recently appointed in the States, staying on the East Coast, when the corporate officer on the West Coast, he refuses to translocate, but he flies across the continent 3 times a week. What sustainability is that? So let's not, these are facts I'm giving you. I can give you dozens of facts. Unless we look at a bit on our lifestyle, how are we working? It's not going to work. It's not, we're just going to say, and so these are the 3 things I think we need to look at. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Aloysius. I am going to post your answer in the chat box now. And unfortunately, we are running a little bit low on time, but we did have some really, really good in-depth questions that kept coming in from Masayo Hada. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and from Arvin Gore. Not to worry, we have your questions now, and we will answer them via email. We'll get in touch with you separately. But with about 2 minutes left, I just wanted to take the time to thank everyone for joining us. We really do appreciate you taking the time to participate in our dialogue. At the same time, please give another round of applause to our guest expert speakers, Aloysius Fernandez and Bitasta Roy Mehta. Thank you for joining us today in this conversation. As we all know, it's such a rich topic. We only just barely scratched the surface of it. So for those of you who would like to revisit this conversation, no worries. Please do visit our Change It All pages on Facebook and LinkedIn, where we will have posts of the recording. So please do like and follow us to get more updates. And in the meantime, do have a great Thursday evening and a lovely evening, a lovely weekend ahead. Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.